Open the EcoHouse1 sample file to get started with radiosity. Do a test render. At this point the rendering is being done by the scan line, and it's not particularly realistic, as you can see. We will be able to achieve much better results with radiosity. But radiosity is an involved process, and it begins by considering the light sources and materials that you've assigned in your scene. We'll have to make changes to both of these before we can actually perform the radiosity calculation. This scene right now is lit by the sun. There are no artificial light sources inside the architecture. If they were, they should be photometric light sources, not standard lights. Go ahead and select the daylight system. And right now the sunlight is of the standard type, which means that it's a direct light. And this is suitable for the scan line, but not so much for radiosity. Change that to IES Sun. This stands for the Illuminating Engineering Society, and it will input physically accurate parameters for the sun. Change Skylight to IES Sky, and notice that the sun parameters have an intensity that's set here. The value that appears here is governed by the system, and that's controlled on the Motion tab. Here you can set the location of the site, the time of year, and time of day. Also, very important is the north direction. And you can see the compass reveals that south is that way. So most of the light coming in the northern hemisphere will be coming from the south through these skylights and clerestory windows. I'll go back to the Modify tab and scroll down a little more. Down here we have parameters for the sky. And notice the intensity value is about 90,000 lux right now. And that's on a clear day with no clouds. If it's a partly cloudy day, the intensity is greatly reduced of the sun. And on a cloudy day, it's like there's no sun. And all the illumination would be coming from the sky, so the illumination would be more diffuse. Let's go with the compromise of partly cloudy so that we have some sunlight and some illumination from the sky. So far so good. That's all we have to do to set up the light source for radiosity. Now let's think about the materials. Open the material editor and you'll find that there are 6 materials in this scene. I'll right click on a sample slot and change this to 6x4 sample windows so that you can see all 6 materials across the top here. Now, before we get working in the editor too much, I'd like to show you how you can turn on some additional parameters that are very helpful when you're working with radiosity. I'm going to go to the Customize menu under Preferences and go to the Radiosity tab. Check this option to display reflectance and transmittance information in the material editor, and it doesn't take effect until you close and reopen the editor. Now right here, this is what we've added, these values, and these are all important for radiosity. In radiosity, it's not just the light source that illuminates the scene. All the surfaces in the model can act as light sources. So the materials govern how much of that light energy gets bounced around. So the reflectance is very important. Also important is that you use the right type of material. Right now all of the materials here are of the standard type and multi-sub-object type. And that's not going to do for radiosity. You need to use architectural materials. They are designed to work expressly with radiosity. So I'm going to repurpose all of my existing materials and convert them into architectural materials. I've opened the navigator to help analyze each material. The paint material here is very simple. It has a white diffuse color, and it has no maps. Change the type to architectural. The name remains, just the type has changed. Architectural materials are controlled and shaded by the template that you select. So it's very important that you select a template here. In this case, I'm dealing with paint, and I have three choices. I'll go with paint flat. I'll select a color for that paint right here, and I'll make it nearly white in grayscale. And as I do that, notice that the reflectance information turned red. This means that the color that I've chosen has caused this material to fall out of spec, meaning it's impossible to have a paint that actually reflects 93% of the light. We need to be careful and adjust the diffuse color to keep this within a physical range. That is done by adjusting the value in the HSV system. As I decrease the value, you'll see the reflectance go down. Now it's turned black to indicate that it's within spec. If you go too low, it will turn blue to indicate that it's not reflecting enough light to simulate a real-world paint. In this case, I want to have some bright white paint, so I want to bring this up to a value that stays black but doesn't turn red, which turns out to be nearly 80%. I'll set it here at 78%, and that would be about the brightest paint that you can have in the real world. I'll go on to the next material. This material has two maps. It's the same map. It's a gradient ramp. And if I change the type, I will lose that map. So in order to save the work that's been done on that map, I will drag the map out and put it into a slot. I'll put it into the slot directly below the material. I'll instance it there, and here you can see the gradient ramp parameters. This is simulating a standing seam metal roof. And this is the seam, and this is the rest of the roof. So this is just a map. I can't go up. The map is filling up the whole slot. I'm putting it here for safekeeping while I adjust this material. Change its type to architectural, and then drag the map into the diffuse map of the architectural material and instance it there. So far, so good. Click this button to take the average color of that map and put it into this slot. This is important because it governs the reflectance. Now, remember in the original material, it had a bump map. We can simulate that with special effects in an architectural material. Drag the map and drop it into the bump channel. That makes the roof just look a little bit more realistic, with the standing seams bumping out of the surface of the roof. Let's go on to the next material. It has a single diffuse color map. I will protect that map by dragging it into an unused slot. I'll go back to the original material, change its type to architectural, drag the map into the diffuse map slot, and instance it. Click this button to put the average color into this slot. I need to also select the template. In this case, I'm dealing with wood, and there are two choices. I'll go with wood unfinished. And as I do that, observe that these turned red. It's getting the reflectance information from this color and from the bitmap. And apparently that's too bright. To correct that, we can wrap this material in another one. Click on Architectural and wrap it in an advanced lighting override material. This is a special material that is used to adjust the radiosity. It's important to keep the old material as a submaterial, or it won't be wrapped. I'll click OK, and now you can see the structure. At the top level we have the advanced lighting override material, and it wraps and contains the architectural material. And inside of that we have the bitmap. So I'll go back up to the top level and adjust the reflectance scale right here. Right now this is doing nothing. It's kind of like a pass-through. If we change these values, we will be doing something to the radiosity properties. This icon represents the light that's reflecting off of the surface. I'm going to turn down this value, and as I do that, you'll see these values change. I need to get them in spec for unfinished wood. So that works. I'm just going to backtrack here and look at the metal material. I think I neglected to select a template, and this is very important because it controls what's in spec and what's out of spec. So for this metal roof, it is metal, yes, but it's going to be painted. So I will select Paint Semi-Gloss to represent this material. And apparently the gradient ramp is within spec, so everything's okay. The template also creates a shader for the material, so it's important beyond setting the reflectance to select the proper template. Moving on, I'll select this material. It's a multi-sub object with several children. This represents the windows. And this is one of the AEC templates that comes in the template library. I'm not so concerned about these materials because they occupy a very small part of the scene. However, the glazing might be important, and that's represented here by the panels material. I'll go into that one and change it. It doesn't have any maps. I'll change from standard to architectural, and I'll select glass clear. Turn on the background to see the glass. It's very dark. Change the color to white, and the glass looks much better. It's out of spec right here because it's 100% transparent, and no glass in the real world is 100% transparent, or you wouldn't be able to see it at all. I'll turn this down a little bit just to get it within the correct specification for this real world material. Now that's all I need to do. I'm not going to go ahead and change each one of these other materials, although technically I should. I know that the standard material will be automatically converted for use in radiosity, but it won't be physically accurate. Again, I'm not so concerned because these materials represent the frames of the windows, and they're very small in the scene. I'll go over here to this material and see that it is metal and it's very dark. Change that to architectural, select the template, metal flat, and I'll change the color to be a bit darker. I'm still in spec, everything's fine. Go on to this material. Notice that it has a couple of maps. Let's take a look at it down here in the maps rollout. It's the same map. It's a picture of this slate tile. I'd like to preserve that map by dragging it into a slot. Then I can go back to the original material, change the type to architectural, drag the map into the diffuse map slot, and copy the average color in here. Select the right kind of template. In this case, I'll call it masonry. And it's slightly out of spec here. It's just the maximum of the reflectance is out of spec. The average is okay. So this might be all right, but I can tone it down a little bit by decreasing the diffuse map percentage until we get in spec. Now if I have to go too far, it's not worth it. And I would say it's not worth it because I'm all the way down to 22. I'm going to go back up to 100 and wrap this material in an advanced lighting override. Now I can turn down the reflectance to get it within spec. In this way, I'm not going to wash out the texture. I'm just going to tweak the reflectance scale to get it within the physically accurate parameter. So there you have it. This is the kind of work that you have to do to convert a scene for radiosity. Save this as Eco House 2.